commitment, honesty, integrity, these are the core values that create the foundation for Umbrella.
Umbrella Incorporated. For a company that existed for roughly 3 decades, it has a storied, complex history behind it. While the origins of the company are one singular story, the company's history would branch off into 3 separate paths following its creation in 1968. Previously, we have covered the story of James Marcus, one of 3 Umbrella founders, and all throughout, Oswell Spencer, another founder, makes various appearances and mentions due to his continued presence beyond Umbrella's demise. But there is one final founding member we have touched very little upon, and without his story, we won't be able to properly explain the biohazard incident that followed the Sheena Island incident in November of 1998. This is the story of Edward Ashford and the Ashford aristocracy, a family once considered nobility, yet spent more than half of its lifespan chasing a reputation it could never live up to. In this episode, we will travel back to the beginning of the Ashford family's entry into the world of nobility, closely examining their history, their role in Umbrella, and the misfortunes they suffered that sparked rumors of a family curse. Travel 61 miles southeast of central London to the southern edge of North Downs and just along the River Great Stour, and you will find the town of Ashford. The town itself may not be something you're familiar with. However, Ashford lies within Kent County, which is famously known as the Garden of England. Serving as a major gateway to Europe via the Dover ferry ports and Channel Tunnel, the county sports the well-known historic city of Canterbury, the White Cliffs of Dover, and is also nicknamed the oldest county, as it is home to numerous castles such as Dover, Leeds, and Rochester Cathedral.
Suppose an angel crossed the south coast somewhere about Folkestone. I'm sure angels often do, on their way to Canterbury, or Westminster perhaps. Instantly he would find himself above the rich flat lands of Kent.
Garden of England, oldest county, gateway to England. Kent County is storied and rich history, but not all history is good history. Today, Kent County is also known as the birthplace of one of the former Umbrella Corporation's founders. Born sometime in the late 19th century, Veronica Ashford was the child of an aristocratic family. Having been born into wealth was certainly a good head start in life, but aside from wealth, Veronica was recognized as a child prodigy from a very young age. By the time she hit age 10, she was known to have attained at least 1 master's degree, being well versed in topics surrounding mathematics, linguistics, and biology. By the time Veronica reached adulthood, her reputation as a beautiful yet genius woman preceded her, which caused her to be ennobled with the title of Countess. Viewed as a living example of human perfection, Veronica would lead the Ashford name into becoming revered and respected throughout the world of British nobility. Veronica would go on to give birth to Stanley Ashford, taking on the title of 2nd Earl Ashford after her death. Veronica was embalmed and entombed within the Ashford Manor, which is a detail that will be important as we progress. Stanley Ashford would father 2 twin boys, Thomas and Arthur Ashford, though Thomas was the older of the 2 and therefore would later on take on the title of the 3rd Earl Ashford. It is unclear how and when he passed away, but the younger brother Arthur would become the 4th Earl Ashford. In the 1930s, during the build-up period preceding World War II, German politician and military commander Hermann Göring would make several diplomatic visits to the United Kingdom in an effort to promote Anglo-German unity against the Nazi Party's perceived enemies. Arthur was one of many influential noble figures Göring had met, and as a further gesture of goodwill, had gifted Arthur with a pair of Golden Luger P08 pistols. At this time, the young son of Arthur Ashford was present during this visit. Edward Ashford, only a child at the time, was fascinated by Göring's discussions surrounding genetic impurity and eugenics. He would take this curiosity with him into his educational years and would befriend several others in university that shared Edward's interests in eugenics. Two of these peers would become important figures in a certain corporation's founding: James Marcus and Oswell E. Spencer. It is unclear when Edward's father, Arthur, passed away, and so we are unable to tell if Edward carried the title of Earl while he was studying in university. We do know that Edward was in his 30s during his time in university, and that the title would be bestowed upon him at some point before the founding of Umbrella. The story behind Umbrella's founding has been detailed in our previous works, but to put it in brief, Edward, James, and Oswell would form the Umbrella Corporation as a front to generate funds for their secretive viral research program.
For products which improve the quality of living. Pharmaceuticals to maintain and improve health.
Spurred by their collective beliefs in eugenics, they would follow Spencer's theory surrounding a West African Asteracean flower called Sonnentrep and its potential for carrying a genetic-altering virus. After they confirmed the virus's existence, which they named Progenitor, they would go on to form the Umbrella Corporation, and through the research they were able to conduct using the front company, they quickly discovered the virus's potential to spawn other lethal variants, effectively being a source of biological weaponry. On top of raising funds through the corporation, the founders agreed that selling biological weapons to the United States military would be even more lucrative. But in order for the military to be willing to violate international law, the weapons would need to be worth it, as lethal and unique as they possibly could be. This need for a perfect weapon immediately created the conditions for competition to arise amongst the founders. This competition is exactly what Edward thought he needed. The Ashford family name had no notable achievements behind it for many decades at that point, and the fear of losing influence and prestige weighed heavily on Edward. Just as well, Edward had a son named Alexander, and they both shared the same concern for their namesake's legacy. Like the other two founders, Edward would immerse himself in his own research, using an Umbrella research facility built in Antarctica, while Alexander remained in Europe, toiling away on a secret project he had also hoped would revitalize the family's influence. While Umbrella's establishment was underway, Alexander and his father began to devise plans to ensure the Ashford family not only remained an integral part of Umbrella, but could one day take over the company entirely. Alexander never gained any formal degree in virology and therefore would not be allowed by Umbrella to continue his father's work should anything happen to him. While Edward worked on progenitor-based projects in Antarctica, Alexander began working on a two-phase plan of his own. First, he would need to find out if any human genetics regulated intelligence and isolate that gene, which he had succeeded in doing. This breakthrough discovery would fuel the second part of the plan, which was to engineer a clone using Ashford genetics and imbue it with prodigy-like intelligence. As far as Alexander was concerned, there was no better model for this clone than the late Countess Veronica Ashford herself. Remember how it was mentioned that Veronica's corpse was embalmed and entombed within the Ashford Manor? Alexander would extract DNA samples from the embalmed Veronica to use within his plan. Thus, the name for this secret project came to Alexander quickly. Project Code Veronica, engineering a true successor to the Ashford dynasty, comparable only to the late Countess herself. In his efforts to maintain absolute control over Umbrella, Oswell E. Spencer would orchestrate an accident within the Antarctic facility, resulting in Edward Ashford becoming infected with the progenitor virus. Edward would not survive the accident, and as a result, the Antarctic facility's progenitor projects would come to a halt. While Spencer's attention was now turned towards the United States and the Arklay Mountains laboratory sites, Alexander continued to rapidly work on Project Code Veronica. His fears of losing his father and the progenitor research were finally realized, but it wouldn't be long before the now 6th Earl of Ashford's efforts would finally pay off. In 1971, Project Code Veronica resulted in 2 twin embryos, male and female. The male was named Alfred and sported slightly above average intelligence. The female was named Alexia, but unlike her brother, her level of intellect was unfathomable. Mirroring the late Countess in almost every way, Alexia would become an intellectual prodigy at a very young age. By age 10, just like the Countess, she would graduate with a master's degree from a prestigious university that remains unnamed. Just as it always does, Umbrella took notice of individuals with superior intellect and quickly offered Alexia the position of head researcher at Edward Ashford's former post in Antarctica. It is left unclear whether Umbrella knew or didn't know Alexia was a clone created by the late Edward Ashford's son. Around the year 1981, during the time in which Alexia was revitalizing the progenitor research in Antarctica, a young Umbrella scientist in America, Dr. William Birkin, began to view Alexia as a rival despite her age. He too was seeking a breakthrough in his own research into the T-virus strain, stolen from the now deceased Dr. James Marcus. From what we've been able to gather, Birkin had every right to fear Alexia's intellect. She was reconstructing Edward Ashford's research at an alarming pace, her genius always on full display. Unfortunately, along with the discovery of a gene that regulates intellect, Alexander noted this also came with a mental side effect that would also show within Alexia's behavior. In some cases, high levels of intellect can be coupled with a lack of empathy. In Alexia's case, it was observed that while she was a genius, she also carried a great disdain for humanity and would commonly be heard referring to individuals and groups as ignorant masses. Hatred was part of Alexia's life from very early on, but that hatred came from a place of mental logic that perhaps you and I will never understand. During her progenitor research, Alexia focused on creating a refined variant of the virus that would not impair cognitive functions. Considering Umbrella used all manner of animals, insects, and even plants in their research, it isn't surprising that Alexia had a colony of ants at the Arctic facility to study upon. She would come to discover a retrovirus within the genome of some, but not all, ant queens. Her notes indicate that she believed the eusocial nature of ant colonies were a sort of adoration for their queen, a view likely shaped by her megalomaniacal personality. From all of this came the idea of combining the retrovirus with progenitor, strengthened by genetic attributes from certain plants, and topped off with the intelligence gene discovered by Alexander Ashford. She would call this creation T-Veronica, in honor of the late Countess Veronica Ashford. Alexia's hatred for humanity would be exacerbated in 1982 when Alfred, the overlooked twin of Alexia, showed his sister a secret room he had discovered within the Arctic facility. There, they both learned the truth about where they came from. Alexander had been horrified by the idea of the public learning about the twins' true origins, and thusly crafted a believable adoption story for both the twins and the public, hiding the truth of Project Code Veronica within the Arctic base. Both twins would become hateful towards Alexander, more so Alexia, who already was known to harbor a disdain for her father, similarly to how she viewed the rest of humanity. Both Alexia and Alfred captured Alexander and forcibly used him as a test subject for the T-Veronica virus. After some time, Alexander would be deemed a failed experiment after he mutated into a vicious, psychotic creature. They would have Alexander confined deep within the Arctic base, still alive, but mentally lost. He would become somewhat of a facility legend between 1982 and 1998, being given the nickname Nosferatu by workers frightened by tales of a monster chained away in the basement of the facility. Through this evil deed, Alexia was able to discover a process that would eliminate the viral corruption brought on by the T-Veronica virus, allowing the infected host to retain cognitive brain function and intelligence. This was a major breakthrough in comparison to the cognitive damage brought on by most T-virus variants, but it would require an infected host to immediately undergo cryostasis for approximately 15 years in order to stabilize the virus during its mutation phases. Alexia saw this as the perfect way to achieve godlike status, and so, with the help of her loyal brother Alfred, stories regarding unexplained, sudden demises for both Alexia and Alexander Ashford were fabricated. The public and Umbrella would be led to believe their deaths were simply untimely and unfortunate.
Authorities say that cause of death is believed to have been a heart attack.
In truth, Alexander, or Nosferatu, would remain a prisoner below the Arctic base for 15 years, while Alexia secretly slept in cryostatism, awaiting the day to emerge as a god amongst men. Only 12 years old by this point, Alfred is now left alone to carry on the role of maintaining the family's prestige, though at this point it could be argued that there really isn't much of that left. Overcoming his grief, he would go on into school, college, and eventually using his family name in academics to find employment within Umbrella. He would jump back and forth between various roles within the company and always took particular interest in the company's use of paramilitary forces and prison complexes. While he was acting director of the Antarctic facility, he would abandon those duties in the early 1990s when he was given the position of governor to one of Umbrella's many islands they owned, Rockford Island. Umbrella had invested in the small island during the 1980s. Up until the 1990s, there was a very small population that lived on the island, but they were eventually driven out by Umbrella upon making the decision to militarize the island instead. While many of their facilities worldwide sported prison infrastructure, there wasn't a location dedicated to imprisoning the company's enemies or traitors. Rockford Island would serve this purpose and would also serve as a training boot camp for its paramilitary forces, both the UBCS and the USS. And so, Alfred, bestowing the title of 7th Earl Ashford upon himself, gleefully took on the role of the island's governor and, much like the Commander Vincent Goldman from Sheena Island, ruled it with an iron fist. He would have a private residence built on the island, one in which he envisioned as the perfect home for he and Alexia to one day reside within as rulers over the world. The Ashford lineage will come to a complete close in December of 1998, when the subject of our next video takes place. But in retrospect, One could say their story came to a close long before the eventual death of Alfred and Alexia Ashford. So much effort was poured into the pursuit of prestige and nobility by generations of Ashford earls. But in all that effort, all they managed to do was prove to everyone that indeed, the Ashford family line was cursed. Not by mysticism or ritual, but rather by pride.